Monday, July 21. 7 days to go until PFT Live is back and PFT PM gets placed sort of on hiatus, sort of hibernation. But as you know, if you pay attention, and thank you if you do, PFT PM becomes the process that gets activated if there's something to discuss after 9 a.m. Eastern on any of the days when we happen to have PFT Live. But during the annual PFT Live hiatus, PFT PM is the fixture. I missed the first 2 days for medical reasons. One day was a physical. The second day was for a benign condition that I believe is under control. I hope it's under control. Every weekday since then, PFT PM, every weekday since then, we've been talking because there has been plenty about which to talk as it relates to the NFL. And now training camps are opening. So the bandwidth is narrowing. There's plenty of stuff to talk about football related, but there's still some non-playing field issues that need to be addressed. And as I say all the time, we don't pick the stories pick us. We just go with what is happening. And I know from examining the real-time traffic that even though there were plenty of people in the media who thought that none of the reporting that Pablo Torre and I were doing had any relevance, would move the needle, had any significance, yada, yada, yada. You've been engaged, reading the stories, consuming the videos, and wanting to know exactly how this thing is going to end. And it's been a roller coaster, and I feel like there are still plenty of ups and downs and twists and turns still to come. The latest happening out of the blue on Sunday afternoon. Chief Strategy Officer of the NFL Players Association, J.C. Tretter, the former union president who was in the position when Lloyd Howell was hired through a very top secret, non-transparent process because it's us against them and the media is meddling and we don't want anyone to know our business and we don't want anyone influencing. Yeah, so they do this top secret thing where there's no proper vetting externally. You know, the media can be a very powerful external vetter of candidates. It was all done secretly, and there was never much of an explanation, if any, as to even who the candidates were. Well, more is coming out because now that Tretter has resigned, and the article that landed out of the blue yesterday afternoon around 4 o'clock Eastern, it surely was several hours coming. There was a full hour interview that J.C. Tretter did with Jonathan Jones of CBS Sports. And I guess I just need to say it. I don't want to start any more fights than I'm already naturally in. But it was softball-ish. There wasn't a lot of follow-up. There weren't a lot of probing questions. It was basically an opportunity for J.C. Tretter to tell his story uninterrupted by, now, wait a minute. Let me make sure I understand this. Now, wait a minute. Wait, you're saying that is what happened? And I'll give you a for instance. Tretter insists, and I haven't written about this yet at PFT because there are so many potential stories that flow from the J.C. Tretter interview and other reporting that's been done. I'm trying to parse it out. I'm trying to let them breathe. I'm trying to let people understand. I don't want to overpower ProFootballTalk.com with stories about this. But here's a great example of where follow-up would have been justified, if not required. Tretter insists he knew nothing about the secret deal between the NFLPA and the NFL to conceal the victory, partial victory by the union in the collusion case. Now, quick refresher. And this is how this all kind of got started. I was determined to find out what happened with the collusion case to get the ruling. Pablo Torre and I came together and we had a competition. He won. He got it, the 61-page ruling. He brought it to light. We've spent a lot of time talking about it. And more compelling than the fact that the NFL got its hand caught in the collusion cookie jar is the fact that the union never used this as a vehicle for leverage. You have to build leverage wherever you can. Tretter said that himself just before he also suggested that disgruntled running backs fake injuries because you can't be fined if you don't practice due to an injury. But he said you build leverage any and every way you can. There was plenty of mileage that the union could have gotten out of the collusion ruling, but it was hidden for more than 5 months until we brought it to light. So Tretter's position is he had nothing to do with it, didn't know anything about it. Well, dude, why didn't your resignation come a month ago? Because let's put it this way. He's the chief strategy officer for the NFLPA. The moment he finds out that his position was undermined, his authority was usurped, his entire existence was rendered irrelevant by the NFLPA executive director ignoring the chief strategy officer while developing the strategy to hide the victory in the collusion case, to hide the ruling that is chock full of evidence that could be used to hammer the NFL. If you're not going to consult with J.C. Tretter in formulating the strategy to hide this ruling, why is he even there? Why am I here? And that would have been the conversation that I had if I'm J.C. Tretter, if I truly had nothing to do with it and no knowledge of any of this hiding of the collusion ruling. Lloyd, kind of curious. Just asking a couple of questions here. Why didn't you tell me you're hiding this ruling? I'm the chief strategy officer. How'd you come up with the strategy? Did you not ask your chief strategy officer? It's the job you created and hired me for. So you're going to just come up with strategies without talking to your chief strategy officer? So, as Pablo noted on Twitter, more artfully than I could, J.C. Tretter is not the most reliable narrator of this story. And one of the things that really caught my eye as the dust settled, and I saw a Washington Post story that was posted last night with multiple tweets from Mark Maskey, who wrote the thing, pushing the idea that the executive committee, when it came down to two candidates, David White, who had been the SAG-AFTRA union chief, and Lloyd Howell, the executive committee did a straw poll, and it was 10-1, White over Howell. And for whatever reason, the executive committee never shared their recommendation with the player representatives, the 32 players who voted on the executive director. They never shared it with them because apparently they didn't ask. But that was in the Washington Post story as if it was new, as if it was brand new, attributed to unnamed sources, right near the top of a very long story. So many stories that get posted and printed are so much longer than they need to be. You could break them into 2 or 3 stories and make more money off of them. It's maybe one of the reasons why so many newspapers and other media outlets go belly up. You don't have to have a contest to make the longest possible story you can. My point is this. When you look at that story, it feels like the biggest news in there, in the opinion of the Washington Post, was this 10-1. The executive committee favored David White over Lloyd Howell. Well, Tretter himself said it in the interview that was posted hours before the Washington Post story landed. It is so weird, and it makes me wonder, did Tretter catch wind of the Washington Post story? Did he know that the centerpiece of the story was going to be that the executive committee didn't share with the Board of Player Representatives their overwhelming recommendation that David White be hired instead of Lloyd Howell? And that's all coming out, and that's going to create another storm of controversy, and that's going to be the thing that keeps J.C. Tretter from becoming the interim executive director. So just steal their thunder. We'll scoop the Post. We'll tell the world before the Post can report it. And it creates a very different impression that way. Because if Tretter doesn't speak ahead of time and the Post drops that story, it looks like someone suppressed the fact that David White was the clear preference of the executive committee in communicating information to the Board of Player Representatives in order to get Howell the job. Now, Tretter says he's not the one who voted for Howell when they did the straw poll. The thing about straw polls, that there's no record. So when it's 10-1, anyone can say with a straight face, wasn't me. I was the one who wanted Howell. So Tretter says, I'm not the one that wanted Howell. And the player reps didn't ask for a recommendation. And there was a quote in the Jonathan Jones story, which was 99.9% an interview of J.C. Tretter, this quote attributed to an unnamed union source, that basically the player reps just want to go drink and play golf, and they're not going to read the materials given to them. Now, and I know that it's bad form, but it's never stopped me before. It sure feels like that was something Tretter said to Jones, but said that's off the record. So it gets added to the story as an unnamed union source when it was just something Tretter wasn't comfortable putting his name on, because he's suggesting that the player reps weren't taking the position seriously, weren't taking the assignment seriously, weren't doing the job the way they should. But that's all the more reason to tell them your recommendation. I mean, the executive committee was the body that set the table. They did all the trimming of candidates from 12 down to the 2. So if you're going to present the final 2, and it's a landslide in the opinion of the executive committee as to who the guy should be, it's malpractice to not tell the board of player representatives in no uncertain terms, this is the guy we like. This is the guy in whom we believe. There's nothing wrong with telling them that in this top secret process that had no transparency. So I feel like people are running for cover now that the stuff has really hit the fan, and there's a federal investigation that possibly will expand. Why wouldn't it expand? Once you see the story about strip club expenses that were charged to a union that is funded by dues and is regulated heavily by the federal government, yeah, people are going to start showing up with microscopes. And to the extent that there are concerns about liability, and there was a one-page document making the rounds over the weekend about all the liability issues arising from potentially making J.C. Tretter the interim executive director, people are running for cover and saying it's not my fault. And that's the great irony here before I move on. The great irony is this. Tretter is the one who insisted on secrecy, insisted on it, defended it. It's good governance to keep it all secret. We don't want the media interfering. We don't want people politicking, campaigning through the media for this job. Fine. So now that the Lloyd Howell regime has collapsed, you're going to be transparent and say, don't blame us. We wanted the other guy. You kept your mouth shut for 2 years. But now that it's imploded, don't blame us. We wanted the other guy. Meanwhile, the executive committee and the board of player representatives trying to figure out the next moves. My advice is very simple. Don't rush into another interim executive director or any interim executive director. They haven't hired one yet. If Tretter's out, that complicates everything. I think it makes sense to look outside the building. People who have union experience, people who maybe have NFLPA experience, who may be viable candidates to serve as interim executive director. I would, as I've said before, disqualify anyone who's had a direct or indirect connection to Lloyd Howell. Find somebody who is not caught up in any of this, the selection of Howell or working with or under Howell and tolerating everything that's happened the last 2 years, because we still don't know how deep the rabbit hole goes. By the way, may have a guest tomorrow on PFT PM. Tentative plan to have another voice, another face to discuss this issue. And you may not need more than one guess as to who that guest might be. Also, percolating, if not flat out boiling in the NFL, came out of nowhere on Sunday. Nowhere. Culture wars. Culture wars. We need a little distraction. Quit talking about that other thing. Let's talk about the name of the Washington Commanders. The president took to Truth Social with a mandate. Immediately change the name of the Commanders. Get it done. The Cleveland Guardians also were part of it, but it was mainly focused on the fact that the Commanders changed 5 years ago their name that is now a dictionary-defined slur. Language changes over time. There are plenty of words that were fine and dandy once upon a time and no longer are. Stuff happens. The president wants the Commanders to go back to the old name. And that ended up being a big story, and he recognized it was a big story, so he swooped back in later in the day, and he did the thing that somebody has been predicting he'll eventually do. Part of the quid pro quo for getting a stadium built in D.C. with the help of the commander-in-chief, the Commanders have to change their name back to what it was. I may require them to do it if they want my help in getting this done. That's the clearest sign yet. And we've seen it swirling. You've got the president talking about maybe they should go back to their old name. You've got stories that maybe the federal government's going to get involved because D.C. Council is dragging their feet. They've dragged their feet past the point where D.C. had exclusive negotiating rights with the Commanders. Maryland and Virginia reportedly already in touch with the team about possible stadium deals. You want to be in D.C., you may have to go back to the old name. And to their credit, the Guardians issued comments. It wasn't a statement. I think it was quotes directly from one of their executives that they're not changing their name, despite this pressure from the most powerful person in the free world. The Commanders haven't said anything. I sent 2 emails yesterday to multiple PR people who are handling this thing for the Commanders, specifically handling this issue. No response to 2 different emails. NFL, no response to 2 different emails. Look, I understand that they're trying to tiptoe very gingerly with the president. They don't want the president to direct an executive order at the NFL. We've seen it with the Rooney Rule and diversity efforts. Just trying to tiptoe. No sudden moves. Let's not become the focal point. We've seen what happens to the other entities that have become the focal point of the president's attention. We don't want that. We're not going to say anything. Well, you've already got his attention. He's saying immediately change the name. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Are you going to do it or are you not going to do it? Are you going to stand up and say we're not going to do it? Or are you just going to act like it never happened? Are you going to hide under the bed and just pretend that it never occurred and hope that everyone moves on and hope that the president moves on to something else? I assume that's what they're doing, but I still think at some level, I think Josh Harris would kind of like to go back to the old name. I think he would. He knows he can't say it. And as I've said in the past, having the president basically demand it, man, that provides cover. Hey, I didn't want to go back to the old name, but this is the only way we're getting a stadium. So we got to choose between Commanders or DC Stadium. And we only get the DC Stadium if we go back to the old name. I guess we got to go back to the old name because we want the DC Stadium. Regardless, at some point, they need to say something because it does seem like the Commanders are being cowardly, that they're afraid of the reaction. They're afraid of what the president may say. They're afraid of this, afraid of that. We've got too many people who are afraid nowadays. Everyone's afraid. Nobody wants to speak the truth because we're afraid of the consequences. Will Levis out for the season in Tennessee. Where did this come from? I got the text message from one of the PFT writers today because we communicate almost exclusively by text message, over 100 a day, well over 100 a day. I'm taking this story, I'm taking that story. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? It goes on all day long from the moment the first one of us wakes up to the moment the last one of us goes to bed. Levis out for the season. Well, how did he get injured? Shoulder injury. When did he injure it? Remember last year, didn't he like dive out of bounds and land on his shoulder and that opened the door for Mason Rudolph? And then it was kind of on again, off again. It's kind of like a Derek Carr situation. Like he could play, but if he's not really going to play, let's just get the thing fixed. And I think Levis also wanted to see if someone was going to trade for him. You know, somebody trades for him, he has a chance to play this year. But if he's just stuck on the bench in Tennessee behind Cam Ward, let's just get the thing fixed. And maybe next year there'll be an opportunity to go play somewhere else or be the backup in Tennessee for another year. And then he becomes a free agent. This is year 3 for Will Levis. Next year is going to be year 4. So we'll see how it goes. But that was just a surprise. And it makes me wonder what was really going on behind the scenes. Did they try to trade him? How urgent and imperative is this surgery? Nobody wants to get operated on. That was one of the reasons Derek Carr ultimately retired. He didn't want to have the surgery that he was going to have in order to go forward with his NFL career. Didn't want to do it. Can't blame him. So Levis is doing it, and presumably he'll be healthy in a year, and then we'll see where his career goes from there. Speaking of injuries, speaking of training camps and holdouts or hold-ins and whatnot, Alex Anzalone, linebacker for the Lions, wants a new contract, and you know what happens. If you don't hold out, maybe you hold in. And there were questions how much he was going to be practicing while he's trying to get the new deal. Now he's got a hamstring injury. And I go back to the JC Tretter. I can't tell you to fake an injury, and this is the old school hold in. It's not the conscious, deliberate, hey, I'm showing up at team. You get this, right? I'm not going to practice. You're not going to make me practice. We're going to work on a contract. I'll go to meetings. I'm in the building. Let's just be friends while we work out the business side of things. The old school hold in is, oh, I got a hamstring injury. Oh, I got an arm injury. Oh, I think I have a concussion. Oh, my ankle hurts. Something subjective that allows the player to protect himself and not practice while he waits for his financial reward. But this gets back to the problems the Lions now have because they're good. They've been paying plenty of guys. They've got guys coming up they're going to have to pay. Aiden Hutchinson has yet to get his contract. They're going to make him show that he's healthy by all appearances before they pay him. Anzalone wants his deal. He got injured last year, missed some time, came back for the Week 18 game against the Vikings. He wants to get paid. And that's the reality. Good team, good players, guys want to get paid. We'll see how it plays out for the Lions. And hey, it's good. If you're a Lions fan, you've never had to deal with these issues because the team has been caca for decades. You should want these kinds of problems. That means you're good. When you have players who want to get paid, that means you are good. When you have not enough dollars to go around to take care of all your good players, that's because you are good. And the Lions, by all appearances, will continue to be good. How good are the Dallas Cowboys? I saw these quotes yesterday from Tyler Smith, starting offensive lineman, on the way to Oxnard for training camp. And we know how it goes. This is the time of year when everyone's in the best shape of their life and the team is ready to go to the Super Bowl. Now, not every team can muster the straight-faced, yeah, we could win the Super Bowl this year. But when Tyler Smith says it's realistic for the Cowboys, I mean, it's realistic insofar as they're members in the NFL. They're one of the 32 teams eligible to win a Super Bowl. But is it realistic when you consider the Cowboys haven't been to the NFC Championship, much less the Super Bowl, for 30 years? And I know none of that matters, but it kind of does because it's the same organization. The same organization that has made missteps contractually and that currently is misplaying the Micah Parsons deal. Is it realistic? Look at their schedule. Beyond playing the Eagles and the Commanders twice, they play every team from the NFC North, which sent 3 teams to the playoffs last year, and every team from the AFC West, which sent 3 teams to the playoffs last year. It's not going to be easy. It's not impossible. It's not implausible. It could happen. It'll help if they beat the Eagles to start the season. It'll help if they don't get blown out. If they're competitive against the Eagles, maybe the Cowboys have something this year. We'll find out. And the other side of it, too, is health. We don't know who's going to get hurt. We don't know when they're going to get hurt. We don't know how long they're going to be out, and which player it is changes everything. Dak Prescott missed more than half the year last year. That changes everything. So that's the great unknown that applies to every team. We've spent the full offseason talking about who's going to be good, who's not going to be good. The main thing is injury. Can you stay healthy? Which players get hurt? How does the next man up do? What moves do you make on the fly to make your team better when you lose a key player due to injury? That's all to be determined 1 week at a time. It's why they play the games. And teams are going to be very different from week 1 to week 17. And that's really what it comes down to. Do you punch your ticket to the playoffs? And how healthy are you then? How good are you then? And can you muster the will and the ability and the skill and the points to advance one spot after another to the top of the playoff tree. As it relates to Parsons, I want to just mention this before I move on to the questions. It looks like he's going to show up and not practice until he gets his contract. I wouldn't show up if I were him. Now, last year, our position was don't practice, hold in. You're only making $3 million and you play a position that entails injury. And remember, he had a high ankle sprain last year and missed some time. This year, don't show up because I'm afraid for Parsons that if he shows up, they'll drag their feet and drag their feet and drag their feet. And if you don't have a compelling reason to sign him before week 1, they won't. If he holds out, it's compelling. Ezekiel Elliott held out 6 years ago. Got to get the deal done before week 1. CeeDee Lamb held out last year. Got to get the deal done before week 1. Dak Prescott didn't hold out last year, but the reason they had to get his deal done, once the season started, his attitude is, hey, I get through this season, I'm going to be a free agent next year. Oh, and I'm leaving behind a massive cap charge. You better redo this deal so you're not completely and totally hamstrung by my contract next year, by what's left of my contract, and I'm not here anymore, and I'm gone. That was the leverage to get the deal done. I remember it all broke the morning of the regular season opener against the Browns. If Parsons shows up, this is the Roquan Smith scenario. When Roquan Smith held in with the Bears several years ago, if you don't get a deal done by the time the start of the season rolls around, there's a point where you got to go to work. You got to put your helmet on and go practice and get ready to play. That's the problem with the deliberate and conscious hold-in. The team has the leverage because under the CBA, once you show up, it's a lot harder to leave. It's better to never show up than to show up and try to walk out. That's not good. And that ultimately results in the player being shut down for the entire season. If the team wants to play hardball, the player is shut down for the full season and can't play for anyone if he leaves and doesn't come back. Better to not show up. If you don't show up, you got all the way until week 10 to show up, and you can still play to finish out the season. So don't show up, because if you do, I think what they'll do, they'll make him an offer, and it won't be as good as the offer they would have made if he wasn't there, because he's already in the building. Once he's in the building and he can't leave, they're looking at $24 million under his fifth-year option, or whatever per year he wants now. $45 million, I don't know. More than that, I don't know. But whatever they offer, if he's there, it's going to be less than if he's not there. It's better to be not there. And I know it's not my money that would be lost in daily fines. It's waivable because he's under his rookie contract. It's not my money that would be lost in game checks for each preseason game he misses at $1.33 million. I know it's not my money, but you got to look at the bigger picture here and what he's trying to do. They're never going to give you what you deserve if you show up. I firmly believe that. And they'll kick the can all the way through until next year. They'll pay you $24 million this year, and they'll deal with it next year under the franchise tag. That's what they do. We have to learn from what they've done. We have to glean future decisions and positions from what they've done. And I think if he holds in, unless he's willing to take their best offer, which won't be as good as what it would be if he held out, they're going to squat on him with the fifth-year option of $24 million, and then next year we'll see the franchise tag. And they'll either do a deal in lieu of the tag, or they'll let him play out a year under the tag, like they did with Dak Prescott. And then after that, who knows? You know, there's this lingering sense that at some level the Cowboys view Micah Parsons as more trouble than he's worth, which is ludicrous because of his talent level. You tolerate the podcast. You tolerate whatever it is you don't like. You tolerate it. But it could be they just decide we'll go year to year at this point for as long as we can. This year at $24 million, next year at the franchise tag amount, and then maybe one more year at the enhanced franchise tag number, and then you let him walk away as a free agent after you've gotten, what'll it be then? 7 years out of him. I don't know. I know this. If Parsons wants what he deserves, holding in is not going to get it. Holding out is what he needs to do. All right, question time. And I saw this one, and look. Well, let me ask the question first, and then I'll give you the answer. From Burn Unit. Do you and Pablo Torre feel proud of getting the truth out there about the NFLPA, or a little bad because two have lost their jobs over it, rightfully so, question mark? What are your emotions when these journalistic investigations lead to these types of outcomes? It doesn't happen very often that because of some story that we aggressively pushed, people end up leaving their jobs. And our motivation is to get the truth out, period. And this thing, I'm not going to take much credit for what's happened, but this got rolling. And I go all the way back to the Friday of Memorial Day weekend. Michael Hawley and I were doing PFT Live. And I can't remember how it came up, but something Michael said reminded me of the collusion ruling that had been hidden. And it was weird. Who's hiding it? Why do they want it to be hidden? What the? Hidden. Why? And I became determined in that moment. Like, this is my project now. Things are slowing down, and I am going to find out what happened. I'm going to get that ruling, and I'm going to make it come to light. And right around that same time, Pablo and I had gotten to know each other through his reporting on the whole Jordan Hudson, Bill Belichick thing. We had been in touch, and I think it caused him to pay a little more attention to some of the things I was saying, and he caught wind of basically my call to action. Hey, media, let's all go find this collusion ruling they're hiding from us. Because as I say, and it's true, I say it only because it is true, more than 95% of the journalism in this space is not journalism. It's just telling the world what a team is going to do, what a player is going to do 5 minutes before it gets announced to the world. That's not journalism. Journalism is finding out the stuff they don't want us to know. And they didn't want us to know about this collusion ruling. So Pablo and I joined forces. We became committed to getting this thing out there. He got it, and we took it from there. And look, in the immediate aftermath, nobody else was jumping into the pool. Don Van Natta Jr. and Kalen Kaler of ESPN did some follow-ups. They had some great reporting that kept the ball rolling. Pablo and I did a second episode last week. I think the thing that pushed Lloyd out was knowing that ESPN had the strip club expense report fiasco locked and loaded. I think that's what got Lloyd Howe to walk away. But my decision the Friday Memorial Day weekend to revisit the collusion thing, to not let it disappear, to not be distracted by bright, shiny objects, to not let the hard reset of a new season make us forget all about it. I believe that was the first domino in everything that's fallen since then. But it required a lot of effort and determination and stubbornness. It doesn't happen without the ESPN reporting from Van Natta and Kaler. It definitely doesn't happen without Pablo, but that's where we are. And we want the truth to come out. And if the truth leads to consequences, that's not something that I'm going to think twice about. We just wanted the truth to come out, and it has. But I feel like there's more truth that still is out there that will come out, maybe through ESPN, maybe through Pablo, maybe through PFT, and maybe others are going to jump in. You know, there's a lot of stuff in the Washington Post story from last night, even though the headline sort of was what JC Tretter had already announced to the world multiple hours earlier. There's still some other stuff in there, and other reporters and other publications, they allocate resources to this. So far, there haven't been a lot of resources allocated to this. We'll see where it goes from here. Red Zona UK, a.k.a. Tom Marshall. Is the chaos inside the NFLPA exactly what the NFL wants midway through the current CBA? No. And isn't it funny how the NFL has just gotten off scot-free? I need to write about this. The NFL was caught trying to collude, urging teams to collude, but they didn't collude. Please. There's been no scrutiny of the NFL. Nothing. It's all been NFLPA. I still think the NFL isn't thrilled about this because they had, I believe, engineered a scenario where they had an NFLPA leadership that was going to do what the NFL wanted. I mean, Lloyd Howell himself said last year, who doesn't want more football, myself included? He had since backed off because I think somebody finally convinced him from a bargaining standpoint, you can't just give it up. But I think the NFL was confident they were going to get the deal they wanted. 18 games, 16 international games per year. And I think it's just a matter of time before the NFL tries to change the current formula for how players get paid. The 50-50 split has become too expensive. And the owners think their costs are more than what half of every dollar that comes through the cash register can justify. I think that 50-50 is going to change to something else. And I think they were confident they could get there with Hal, because Hal's a businessman. He's about making deals. He's not about litigation. It's one of the reasons why we think Hal wanted to hide the collusion ruling, because the D. Smith approach was working. You need some of that. There are moments where you got to roll up your sleeves and fight. If you're just, let's work it out, you're going to get steamrolled. Sometimes you got to fight. Sometimes you got to get loud. Sometimes you got to get upset. And that wasn't Lloyd Howell's way. So I don't think the NFL likes this. Now, maybe they'll like the next executive director better. Or maybe they'll find out that the Wicked Witch of the West is going to be worse than the Wicked Witch of the East. Not that anybody in this is wicked. It's just a metaphor. Okay. Andy Bryant, 316. And I love these questions, and I love this format to kind of ponder these things. Do you think that if the NFL expands to 36 teams, they'll get rid of the conferences and have 6 divisions of 6 teams? If one division is in Europe, that makes things easier. Look, I like the creativity and I encourage it, but why would you get rid of the conferences? You just have 3 divisions per conference like they used to have before 2002. 6-team divisions, 3 divisions. Yeah, that's possible. The other approach is 4 and 5 in a 4-team, in a 4-division alignment. That's not the issue. The issue is, if you're going to have a European division, which conference does it go into? What do you do with the excess teams? And how do you deal with the inherent unfairness that one conference has among it a 4-team division, that the way the formula works, you're going to have trips to England, Germany, Italy, wherever, that aren't equally balanced between the 2 conferences. That's one of the challenges. Another one from Tom Marshall, aka A Red Zone UK. Which was more detrimental to the Washington franchise, their previous name or their owner? Without question, it was the owner. And I think that with a different owner, there's a chance they may have weathered the storm in 2020 over the name. Because when you look at how it all reached critical mass, FedEx asked for the name to change. FedEx, major sponsor, was the naming rights partner for the stadium. Fred Smith, the late Fred Smith, CEO and founder of FedEx, was one of the minority partners with Dan Snyder and was trying to get out. I think it was Snyder and the way Snyder was dealing with his partners. I think that all contributed to the groundswell that took out the name. So I think the owner was far more detrimental to the team than the name. I mean, they may go back to the old name. What's going to happen if they go back to the old name? What's as a practical matter? You're going to have people who will say they really shouldn't do it. You're going to have people who won't use it, but they're going to keep playing, and there's going to be a lot of fans that are happy about it. A lot of people buying a lot of gear. They're going to get their DC stadium if they do it. They may get it anyway. No, I think the owner is far more detrimental than the name. Cynthia Hill, do you think Nick Saban will return to coaching, and if so, NFL or college? I firmly believe he'll be back in college football if and when they get what they're looking for by way of NIL, equity of resources. If Nick Saban can go back to equity of resources, he can go back to inequity of recruiting class, because he's sufficiently skilled. When all the money's equal, he knows how to rig the system in his favor. That's the one big fallacy of the idea that, oh, it'll all be parity and there'll be, teams that otherwise don't have a chance will have a chance. No, it'll just reconfigure and somebody else will run the show. It was Alabama and Clemson every year until the money became a factor. And now it's other teams. And if it goes back to the way it was, here comes Alabama and Clemson, or wherever Nick Saban goes in Clemson. All right, I'm going to skip over this one because we've gone on longer than I thought we would. Last question. And a third one, it's the trifecta from A Red Zone UK, aka Tom Marshall. Are we getting run PFT this year? I really enjoy Holly on the show. As far as I know, yes. I know he wants to come back. I know I want to have him back. I would like to have him more, frankly, than I currently have him, but it will at least be one day a week, unless, and sometimes I'm the last one to find out, unless there's something that they haven't told me yet, which is entirely possible, Holly will be back. And I think last year, didn't we do Wednesday, Michael Holly? I think it was Wednesday. And it was Devin McCourty on Tuesday. Wait, we had Sims on Monday. We only had Sims one day a week during the season. Is that possible? I think that's what happened. I think it was Sims on Monday, and then it was 3 days after college football ended, and then it goes to 4 after the season ends. I don't know. I can't remember. If I can't remember, I don't know how you can remember. I just remember this. Joining forces with Michael Holly last year was a blast, and I look forward to working with him again this year. And I know that Fridays had become the de facto tracksuit at Satrial's day, but really, anytime Holly's on, I've got 3 of them now, and I probably should order a couple more. Anytime Holly's on, it's the Adidas Run PFT tracksuit, and I know he's got some already. He's going next level, so it's raising the stakes. But I'm 99.9% sure he will be back. I'm more sure he will be back than I am I will be back. How about that? That's it for today's PFT PM. Remember, guess tomorrow. Guess who it is? We'll see you then, and you'll find out. Find out. No pun intended as to who the guest may be. Have a great day. We'll see you on Tuesday. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.